Hello, this is week 5 of the Machine Quilting Blog Hop, and my name is Vicki. And this week is about the quatrefoil chapter in the book, The Ultimate Guide to Machine Quilting. And I have the book right here. You get to see my sewing machine in the dining room. That's where I quilt. And in fact, my house is set up purposefully to where I am in the center of the house, so I can sit down and I can sew, or I can quilt upstairs on my long arm, which is in my bedroom actually. And it's easy to sit down for 15 minutes and work on things. So that's part of this week is practice. I really had a hard time squeezing in everything, but once I got into the rhythm of prepping and thinking and practicing, it went much better. This week is about loops and swirls and different things where long armers normally start. So I want to show you a few things on my practice piece that I collaged all in a little extra cut-off piece from Quilt. Okay, where I started with my long arming was learning shapes. Loops, little E, big L, little E, like cursive writing. I was ahead of the game because I had to learn cursive writing with both my left and the right hand. But the other part is mirroring what you just did. Because part of long arming, if you don't want to constantly be changing your quilt, you can't just take it off the frame and turn it every time you want to change directions. Some people do, but I don't. So I learned to mirror the L's and the E's, which is what I call this, L's and E's. The next shape that I started with is this curl, or a C, and I try to keep it to where I backtrack right on top, but it's really hard, as you can tell. Matching thread helps. Then the next thing I went on to was the C with like an apostrophe on the end. You curl around, you stop, change direction, you curl around like your C, you stop and change direction. I'll see how that one got kind of closed off, but this one I like. Curl around, stop, change direction. Oh, and then I actually perfectly backtracked it. So that is where I started. Then I learned, I'm going to move the quilt down, tried to do pebbling. And we talked about pebbling early, but what's interesting is once you get going on pebbling, you can start adding different elements to your circles. I'm doing like strings of pearls here, and see, just traveling over top of each other is hard. And then I snuck around and came around this way. But I started filling in some of my pebbles with the olives, and then olives, but curls. And here I decided to want bigger pebbles with like a little curl in it, like that C that I had. And then I came around and made a curl. And you make like figure eights. And here's the martini glass, the olive, I call them martinis. And here it came around. And this one I entered around and made that C or a curl in the middle, which is nice because you can add different elements, wavy lines. Now, on most domestic machines, you use a decorative stitch, but here I just organically traveled. If it's a super long quilt, I'm going to have to break my thread at the end of the row and come back, but it makes some great modern looking texture. Now here's the back of the quilt, and you can see how this green thread really shows up. The next very early element to learn is taking those E's and L's and just trying to make a telephone cord, is what Krista Watson called them in the book, and just going in different directions. I learned these loops and swirls, I called them, and you're learning about traveling. Now here I decided I wanted to make this look like a leaf or a petals out of flower. And then I came back down and I learned to travel, loops and swirls. Here's a butterfly, or a butterfly looking shape. And I came around and I made a paisley. This is how I did this one. Now you can also make a butterfly in an alternate method, which is to come around and make your 4 loops. And then echo. You can do it that way too. Loops and swirls with hearts. Yeah, I love this. Vary your heart shapes and sizes in the direction. Great fill. Martinis on a string, I call these. Just circles, martini, loops, swirls. And here I did like an echoing element and around. Olives on a string. Now this one is paisley. And I started it over here. And you're making elements where you make a teardrop and you come back around. And sometimes you echo yourself 2 or 3 times to get to where you're going. It's really all about traveling and figuring out how you can do what you want to do with traveling and filling the space. Now Krista also did this, and I love this. This is a loopy flower element. And I'm going to start here because this is where I changed from that teardrop. So you start with your curl. And then you build on it with the wavy line. And then you echo the wavy line. And I think these kind of look like roses. And I come back around and you do another floral element. And then the granddaddy of them all is, this is like paisleys and filling. And here, I was practicing again, are these where you're combining elements. I did rainbows on here too. And it's combining the rainbow shape with this shape here. Oh, here they are. So, and these are like Modern Baptist fans. I came around and I backtracked and I backtracked, and you're repeating until you fill the space, and you come around and you do the same thing again. So I'm combining elements here. I got to find where I started on this, because the complication of this is backtracking. Here we go. You come around and you make that curl, and then you come close to the next element and you come around, and what you're doing is you're staying snug to the elements that it's next to, and you're backtracking around. Now, I think I have this upside down to where I was, but you come around and you keep it tight, and then you do, right here is where I ended from this one, and then you come around and you're just keeping it tight to the elements before. And that is a stacked spiral, but really what it is a curl with a rainbow around it. And here's another butterfly. So here's this piece in its entirety, and look at the texture is so much fun. And this lighting is great. We've had a lot of gray, rainy days. But even when you look at the beginning piece, and here again, I was practicing these stacked spirals. The texture is so much fun. So how did I do this on the sampler quilt? Well, this, as you can see, this middle block was where I practiced this week's design elements of repeating the paisleys, the rainbows, and all together in my strings of pearls. Really fun. And we just have to keep our mind open about traveling and filling the spaces. And eventually you'll get to where you're not focused on the task of making the shape, but you're intuitively filling the space and then traveling. So practice on. Week 6 is coming, and it's also full of surprises. All right, this is Hook Feathers for the Machine Quilting Blog Hop, week 5. You can see I've started some swirls. And the thing is, right here, you have to make like a swirl around, stop, and change directions. I always think of this as the apostrophe center. So here we go. I'm making the hook at the end. And you can go once or twice. It's all about filling in the space and changing direction. You can see I'm back up to where I was in the previous hook swirl. The good news about swirls is that you can get to where you just do them intuitively without thinking too much about the filling in of the space or traveling. Like on that one, I just intuitively changed the direction. And that one I didn't even put a hook on because I wanted to fill in the small space. And guess what? You're not even going to notice that that one didn't have a hook like the rest of them, because when I go back around it, I bet I hooked around another one, and you still will have the same angular look to your hook and all your swirls. Another point of interest is to vary the size and vary the number of times you echo around. Now I want to change from a hooked swirl. I want to practice a rainbow swirl. This will be a little harder. So let's see what we can get. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So I'm going up to the row before, and I'm combining two elements of the rainbow and the swirl. Tight little curl. And I'm coming up to the row before and trying to backtrack on the swirl before it. It is a rather difficult little stitch. Trying to keep your spacing even, and so there is a rainbow swirl, or stacked swirl, or whatever you want to call it. Very different from the hooked swirl. The other thing to notice is when you make these, change direction on your swirls and vary the down and up of the centers. Everybody have a great day.